Let's imagine that you're standing in a sun-baked junkyard. The air smells like old oil, rust, and broken dreams. Rows of abandoned cars sit quietly, their glory days long gone. Most people would look at this graveyard and see nothing but scrap metal, destined for the crusher. But not everyone. Because for some crazy gearheads, a junkyard isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's a treasure chest of possibilities, a playground where creativity and chaos collide. And in this story, that playground gave birth to something so insane, so hilariously brilliant, it feels like it shouldn't even exist. The Leaf-Blower Monza. Yes, you heard that right. A Chevy Monza, turbocharged by nothing more than a yard tool. Not a Garrett turbo, not a supercharger kit. A leaf blower, the same thing your neighbor uses to clean his driveway. This wasn't some polished engineering project out of $1 million shop. No CAD software, no wind tunnels, no lab coats. This was pure, unfiltered roadkill energy. That legendary blend of what if, mixed with let's just try it and see what happens. Now, for those who don't know, roadkill is a cultural phenomenon in the car world. It's about building stuff that shouldn't work and then making it work just enough to put a smile on your face. The Leaf-Blower Monza fits right into that DNA. But before we get into the madness of leaf blowers strapped to engines, let's talk about the car itself. The Chevrolet Monza. Born in the mid-1970s, it was GM's little attempt at making a compact car that still carried some sporty vibes. Based on the Vega platform, the Monza was light, cheap, and, let's be honest, forgettable. It never became a Camaro. It never became a Corvette. For years, it was just another small car lost in the crowd. But that nobody's favorite vibe, that's exactly what made it the perfect candidate for junkyard glory. A Monza isn't precious. It's not some priceless collectible. It's the kind of car you can ruin without feeling guilty. And that freedom is where creativity thrives. So, picture it. A group of enthusiasts drag this tired old Monza out of obscurity. Paints faded, interiors shot, engine barely runs. Perfect. Because the goal was never to restore, it was to resurrect it in the weirdest way possible. And then came the idea. What if, instead of spending thousands on performance parts, they used something lying around? What if, instead of a traditional turbo or supercharger, they forced air into the engine with a leaf blower? It sounds like a joke. It was a joke at first, but like most great ideas in the world of roadkill, inspired chaos, the joke got serious. Suddenly, zip ties, duct tape, PVC piping, and a bright, orange leaf blower became the ingredients for one of the most ridiculous backyards builds ever attempted. This wasn't just about horsepower. This was about proving a point that car culture doesn't need rules, doesn't need gatekeepers, doesn't need deep pockets. All you need is imagination, some basic tools, and the willingness to laugh when everything inevitably goes wrong. And oh boy, things did go wrong. But we'll get to that. Because the beauty of the Leaf-Blower Monza isn't that it was fast, or reliable, or even remotely practical. The beauty was in the attempt. The sheer madness of looking at a leaf blower and saying, yeah, that could work. This is the story of how an unloved Chevy Monza, forgotten in a junkyard, became a legend. Not because it was perfect, but because it was perfectly ridiculous. And like all great roadkill stories, it's about more than cars. It's about creativity, chaos, and that sweet moment when failure turns into triumph. So, buckle up, because this ride is going to be loud, messy, and unforgettable. Building a leaf blower turbo. So how exactly does one go from staring at a rusty old Monza to strapping a leaf blower onto it like it's the world's cheapest turbocharger? The idea started the way all great roadkill-inspired projects do, with a laugh. Someone standing in that junkyard looked at the Monza's tired little motor and said, what if we just blew more air into it? Now, in traditional car engineering, That's called forced induction. You've got turbos, you've got superchargers, sophisticated systems that cram more oxygen into an engine, making it burn more fuel and create more power. It's science, precision, big dollar, engineering. But here, science took a back seat. Precision, never heard of it. Big money, forget about it. Instead, someone pointed at a gas-powered leaf blower sitting nearby and said, "Why? Not that." And just like that, the madness had a plan. The leaf blower as a turbo. At first glance, it's insane. A leaf blower isn't meant to power a car. It's meant to blast. Leaves off your driveway. But when you think about it, the principle is the same. It pushes a lot of air fast. The team figured if they could duct that airflow straight into the Monza's carburetor, they'd be mimicking what a turbocharger does. Not perfectly, not efficiently, but enough to maybe squeeze out a little more horsepower. Of course, enough in junkyard engineering terms usually means hold my beer, let's try it. The build process. Zip ties and hope. Step 1 was mounting the leaf blower. No fancy brackets, no laser cut precision, just a Frankenstein combination of duct tape, bungee cords, and whatever scrap metal they could weld together. Step 2 was airflow. The bright orange tube of the blower was pointed directly into the intake. Did it look ridiculous? Absolutely. Did it work? Well, kind of. Step 3 was fuel. More air means the engine needs more fuel to match it. Otherwise, things run lean and kaboom. This meant tinkering with the carburetor, adjusting jets, and hoping the leaf blower didn't just flood the engine with chaos. By the time it was all cobbled together, the Monza looked less like a car and more like something out of a Mad Max movie, an apocalyptic science project powered by equal parts determination and stupidity. And the best part, they were laughing through all of it. The first fire-up, when the key finally turned, the Monza coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. But this time, something was different. The second they pulled the leaf blower's cord and fired it up, the car's idle changed. The engine tone sharpened. Suddenly, it wasn't just breathing, it was gasping for air like it had a new set of lungs. Everyone's jaw dropped. Against all odds, the ridiculous idea worked. Well, worked in the loosest sense. The car revved louder, throttle response felt sharper, and you could almost imagine the horsepower needle ticking upward. It wasn't going to outrun a Ferrari anytime soon, but compared to its sad stock self, the Monza felt alive again. Chaos on the road. Of course, the real test wasn't the garage, it was the open road, and that's where things got hilarious. Picture it, a beat-up Chevy Monza, paint peeling, body panels rattling with a leaf blower duct-taped to its hood. Driving through town, it drew more stares than a Lamborghini. People pointed, laughed, and snapped photos, probably thinking, what on earth am I looking at? But the moment they hit the gas and fired up that blower, the Monza surged forward with surprising eagerness. It wasn't fast, but it was fun fast, and that's the key difference. Because fun doesn't need dyno sheets or stopwatch times. Fun is about feeling alive, and the Leaf-Blower Monza was nothing if not alive. The philosophy of madness. At its heart, this wasn't about building the fastest car. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about creativity without limits, about showing that even in a junkyard surrounded by forgotten metal, you can create something that makes people laugh, cheer, and remember why they fell in love with cars in the first place. And that's the magic of roadkill-inspired builds. They remind us that cars don't have to be perfect to be special. Sometimes they just must be ridiculous enough to make you believe anything is possible. The Leaf-Blower Monza was proof of that. Trials, errors, and hilarious chaos. If there's one thing you can count on with any roadkill-inspired build, it's that chaos is never far behind. And the Leaf-Blower Monza, oh, it had chaos written all over it. Because while the idea looked good in the garage, On the open road, reality came, knocking hard. Problem number 1. Heat and overload. The first big issue came from something no one really thought about: heat. The leaf blower was designed to run for maybe 20 to 30 minutes at a time, blowing leaves off someone's driveway. It was not designed to stay wide open, screaming into a car's intake for miles on end. Within minutes, the blower started getting uncomfortably hot. The plastic casing began to smell like it was melting, and the whole contraption shook violently as if it was protesting the abuse. The Monza didn't mind at first, revving happily as it gulped down boosted air, but the blower itself was clearly on strike. Every time they stopped at a light, someone had to check if the duct tape was holding or if the thing was about to burst into flames. Problem number 2. Fuel and mixture. Then came the fuel problem. Forced induction, real or improvised, means you need more fuel to balance all that extra air. But this was no high-tech EFI system. This was a tired old carburetor trying to keep up with the insanity. Too much blower and the engine would stumble, coughing like it was choking on its own breath. Too little blower and the engine bogged down like it was giving up on life. Finding that perfect sweet spot was impossible. So, driving the Leaf-Blower Monza became a two-man job. One guy on the wheel, one guy operating the leaf blower throttle like some kind of twisted orchestra conductor. More air, less air, keep it steady. It was ridiculous, and it was glorious. Problem number 3, attention from the wrong people. And then there was the attention. You can't exactly drive around with a giant orange leaf blower strapped to your hood and expect to blend in. Kids pointed, laughed, and cheered. Other drivers rolled down their windows, either shouting encouragement or asking, "What the hell is that thing?" But then there were the cops. Let's be honest, explaining a leaf blower turbo to a highway patrol officer is not an easy task. The Monza crew found themselves constantly paranoid that flashing red and blue lights would pop up behind them. Luckily, they avoided any major run-ins, but let's just say, they never stayed in one place too long. The failures that made it better. Every breakdown became part of the comedy. The blower stalled mid-drive, laughter, the duct tape melted, and the intake tube fell off. More laughter. The carburetor flooded so badly the car wouldn't start for half an hour. That was just an excuse to grab snacks. And strangely, each failure made the Monza more lovable, because this wasn't a perfect machine, it was an underdog, fighting against every logical reason it shouldn't exist. The spirit of roadkill. This is what makes projects like this so magical. It's not about speed, it's not about records, it's about the adventure. The Leaf-Blower Monza captured the very spirit of roadkill, doing something so absurd, so impractical, that you couldn't help but root for it. Yes, the car broke down. Yes, it embarrassed its drivers in front of strangers. Yes, it was dangerous, questionable, and insane. But it was also fun, pure, unfiltered, laugh until your stomach hurts fun. One hilarious run. One of the funniest moments came during a test run at the junkyard itself. They floored the gas, fired up the blower, and the Monza spun its tires on the gravel. Everyone cheered like they just won Le Mans. Of course, 10 seconds later, the blower sputtered out and died. The car coasted to a stop, choking on its own fumes, while the team doubled over laughing. That's the beauty of it. For a few glorious seconds, they tasted victory, and that was enough. The chaos never really stopped, but the more problems they faced, the more legendary the Leaf-Blower Monza became. Because sometimes the failures are the story. Against all odds, the unexpected triumph. Here's the thing about ridiculous builds. Occasionally, they work, and when they do, the victory feels 10 times sweeter. That's exactly what happened with the Leaf-Blower Monza. For all its duct tape, chaos, and constant failures, there came a moment when everything aligned, when the stars seemed to say, "All right, let's give these lunatics a win." The day it came alive. It happened on a clear afternoon at a backroad strip of pavement, far away from cops and far away from common sense. The team had spent the morning tinkering, replacing spark plugs, readjusting the carb, retaping the blower intake like surgeons preparing for a critical operation. They fired up the Monza. It coughed, sputtered, then roared to life, louder than it had ever sounded. The leaf blower shrieked in sync, force-feeding air into the engine like it was on a mission. And then, for the first time, the Monza moved with authority. The rear tires clawed at the asphalt, spitting gravel as the car surged forward. The sound was ungodly. Half muscle car, half hardware store, apocalypse. People standing nearby burst into laughter and disbelief. But the Monza didn't stop. It just kept pulling. Numbers that shocked everyone. Now, nobody expected record-breaking performance. This wasn't a dyno queen, but with a stopwatch in hand and a rough stretch of road, they clocked the Monza running a 0 to 60. Time faster than stock. Not by much, but enough to prove the blower wasn't just for show. For a car that was supposed to be dead and forgotten in a junkyard, that tiny improvement felt monumental. The laughter turned into cheers. For once, the Monza wasn't a joke. It was a victory, outrunning doubt. Even better, it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the feeling. Behind the wheel, you could feel the difference. The engine was breathing deeper, harder, almost proud of itself. The throttle response sharpened. The acceleration felt punchier, and for a few glorious minutes, the Monza felt alive in a way no one thought possible. This was the underdog story in real time. A car rescued from the crusher, mocked with a leaf blower turbo, suddenly proving it had some fight left in it. It didn't matter if the gains were modest. What mattered was that, against all odds, the insane experiment worked. The reactions, word started to spread. Videos popped up online, grainy clips of the Monza roaring down a stretch of road, blower screaming, duct tape flapping in the wind. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some laughed, some were impressed. Most were a mix of both. "This is peak roadkill," one commenter wrote. "Bro, that blower is working harder than my entire car." Another joke. "This is the dumbest genius thing I've ever seen," said another. And honestly, they were all right. More than just horsepower. Here's the truth. The Monza didn't become some world-beating drag monster. It wasn't faster than a modern family sedan, but that wasn't the point. The point was that a group of friends took trash and turned it into triumph. They built something so absurd it became legendary. Not because of its speed, but because of its spirit. That's the kind of story you can't fake. That's why the Leaf-Blower Monza became a fan favorite. The moment of glory. The highlight came when the Monza lined up against a buddy's beat-up pickup truck in a friendly drag race. Nobody expected it to win. But when the light turned green, the Monza leapt ahead. Blower howling like a banshee. It crossed the finish line a car length ahead. Everyone went wild, laughing, screaming, hugging each other like they just won Daytona. It didn't matter that it was just a silly backyard race. In that moment, the Leaf-Blower Monza wasn't a joke. It was a champion, proof of what's possible. And that's the beauty of this story. Against all odds, against logic, against common sense, the Leaf-Blower Monza had its day. It proved that with creativity, determination, and just enough duct tape, even the most ridiculous idea can spark magic. The legacy of the Leaf-Blower Monza. Legends aren't always born in polished garages or under the spotlight of million-dollar auctions. Sometimes they rise from piles of junk, fueled not by horsepower alone, but by creativity, laughter, and a refusal to take life too seriously. That's exactly what happened with the Leaf-Blower Monza. At first glance, it was nothing more than a failed GM experiment rescued from the scrapyard, patched together with duct tape, and force-fed by a tool meant for cleaning leaves. By all accounts, it should have been forgotten the moment the cameras stopped rolling. And yet, it wasn't. The Leaf-Blower Monza became something bigger than itself. It wasn't remembered because it was the fastest or the most powerful. It was remembered because it stood for possibility. It proved that you didn't need deep pockets, exotic parts, or a state-of-the-art shop to create something unforgettable. All you needed was imagination, a little stubbornness, and a willingness to laugh at your own failures along the way. For fans, the Monza symbolized freedom, the kind of backyard experimentation every gearhead dream about but rarely dares to try. Internet immortality. When the clips of the Monza tearing down back roads started circulating online, it didn't take long for the car to achieve cult status. Forums, comment sections, and social media threads lit up. Some people mocked it, others defended it, but nobody ignored it. The memes practically wrote themselves, photoshops of the Monza with jet engines, jokes about Home Depot being the new parts supplier for performance builds, and captions like, "Powered by two-stroke dreams and duct tape." And yet, behind the laughter there was respect, because no matter how absurd the build looked, it worked. And that was undeniable, a symbol of roadkill spirit. For the roadkill crew and fans, the Leaf-Blower Monza embodied everything the show stood for, taking risks on ridiculous ideas, finding joy in the process, not just the results, proving that failure can be just as entertaining as success. It wasn't about perfection, it was about passion, watching the Monza struggle, break, get fixed, and then actually win a race reminded people why they fell in love with cars in the first place. It wasn't about lap times. It wasn't about dyno charts. It was about fun, inspiring the next wave. Surprisingly, the Monza didn't just entertain people, it inspired them. Soon, copycat builds started popping up online. People strapped leaf blowers, shop vacs, and even air mattresses to their junkyard cars just to see if they could make a difference. Most failed, some succeeded. All of them carried the same spirit. The Leaf-Blower Monza sparked creativity in a generation of DIY gearheads who realized that sometimes the craziest ideas make the best stories. The emotional underdog. Perhaps the biggest reason the Monza's story stuck is because it was an underdog. Everyone loves to root for the little guy, the one written off before the fight even begins. This wasn't a Ferrari with a V12. It wasn't a Bugatti with engineering brilliance. It was a tired, half-broken Monza that had no business standing out. And yet, it did. It showed the world that even the forgotten, the ugly, the mocked, can have their moment of glory. That's a message that resonates far beyond cars. Its place in automotive lore. Today, when people talk about the Leaf-Blower Monza, it's with a smile. It's remembered alongside other legendary roadkill machines, not because it dominated races, but because it dominated hearts. It taught a lesson every car enthusiast needs to hear, that cars don't always have to be perfect. They just must be fun, and in that sense, the Leaf-Blower Monza might just be one of the most successful projects ever, the lasting laugh. Years later, when fans rewatch those clips, they don't just see a car, they see a moment in time, when friends came together, when chaos met creativity, and when a junkyard relic became immortal. The legacy of the Leaf-Blower Monza is simple. It reminds us of all that sometimes the best stories don't come from winning, they come from daring to try in the first place. And that's why it will always be remembered. If you enjoyed this incredible story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more epic automotive adventures. Your support keeps these stories alive.